just when you think things might be settling down a bit, something happens that really snaps everything back into focus.
You're talking about the Israeli airstrike on Beirut, April 27th.
Exactly. That's what we're diving into today.
And it's so important, isn't it, to see this not just as like an isolated incident.
Right.
It's a major step up, a real escalation, especially with that fragile ceasefire supposedly in place.
This specific strike in Beirut's southern suburbs, the Hadath area, it really demands we take a closer look. The context, the implications.
Absolutely. And to do that, we've pulled together quite a bit of information,
Yeah, we're looking at analysis from CSIS, that's from October 2024, but still incredibly relevant, as you'll hear. Plus, more recent reporting from the Associated Press, All Israel News, Al Jazeera.
India Today, Black Belt News Network, even Dim Sum Daily. It gives us a pretty wide lens.
A really comprehensive view, hopefully.
So our mission today, if you like, is to get underneath the headlines of this latest strike.
We want to understand the why behind it, right? The objectives.
Exactly. And why we're seeing this uptick in violence when there's supposed to be a ceasefire.
Yeah, and what could happen next? Where could this escalation go?
And the role of international players, too. Can they actually do anything? Especially now, after this Beirut strike.
Okay, let's start right there. The April 27th airstrike.
Yeah.
Unpack the specifics for us. What exactly do we know happened?
Right. So the target was the Hadath area, southern suburbs of Beirut. Israel's justification came pretty fast from Netanyahu, from Defense Minister Katz.
And what was their line?
They said they had a Hezbollah infrastructure site, specifically a place they claimed was storing precision missiles.
Missiles they saw as a significant immediate threat to Israel.
That was the core assertion, yes. A direct threat to Israeli security.
And on the ground in Beirut, what were the immediate effects?
Well, reports suggest 3 missiles hit the target. A hangar was destroyed, apparently.
And nearby, collateral damage.
Yeah, damage to buildings nearby, vehicles parked around there. The force was significant.
Casualties.
Thankfully, the initial reports indicated no immediate casualties, but understandably, a lot of panic, fear.
I can imagine.
We heard about families evacuating, especially after. Well, there were reports of warning strikes, and people heard fighter jets overhead.
And Israel claimed they tried to minimize civilian harm.
They did. They said they gave advance warning and used precision munitions. That was their official statement on it.
The Lebanese government obviously reacted. How strongly?
Very strongly. President Aoun condemned it outright, called it a blatant violation of the ceasefire.
And he called for outside help.
Yes, specifically pointed to the U.S. and France as guarantors of that ceasefire. He urged them to step in, put pressure on Israel to stop these strikes.
His concern being stability, a wider conflict.
Absolutely. That this continued aggression could destabilize everything, push things towards a much bigger war.
But Israel has a counter-argument there, don't they? About Lebanon's responsibility.
They do. They basically put it back on the Lebanese government, saying it's their job to stop Hezbollah from arming itself in the first place.
Now, you mentioned this wasn't the first strike on Beirut during the ceasefire period.
That's a really crucial point. No, this is actually the third time Israel had hit Beirut's southern suburbs since the November 2024 ceasefire started.
So it suggests more of a pattern, maybe a strategy, rather than just isolated reactions.
It certainly looks that way.
Okay, now Al Jazeera's reporting had a slightly different angle on the warnings, or lack thereof, for this specific strike.
Yeah, Al Jazeera reported that this particular strike on the 27th came, quote, without any provocation right beforehand.
So it caught people by surprise, unlike a previous one.
Apparently so. They contrasted it with an earlier Beirut strike where there had been some back and forth fighting just before. This one seemed different, more out of the blue for the residents.
It raises questions, doesn't it, about the timing, the intelligence?
Exactly. Was there a shift in Israeli tactics, or was it based on some very specific, urgent intel? And
connecting to that, All Israel News mentioned a recent increase in IDF strikes, generally against Hezbollah. What's supposedly driving that?
Their reporting suggested it's a direct response to intelligence that Hezbollah is actively trying to sort of rebuild, restore command structures, capabilities.
So it fits Israel's stated goal of preventing Hezbollah from getting stronger.
It aligns perfectly, yeah. And remember, earlier that same day, before the Beirut strike,
there was another incident.
Yes, an Israeli drone strike in Halta reportedly killed a Hezbollah member. Israel claimed he was involved in exactly those kinds of rebuilding efforts.
There was even a theory floating around, wasn't there, from a Lebanese general, suggesting the Beirut strike might have been more than just hitting missiles.
Ah, yes, that was interesting. A retired Lebanese general talking to Al Jazeera speculated it could have also been an intelligence gathering operation.
How so?
The idea was, by maybe giving some kind of warning or not making it a total surprise attack, Israel could watch how Hezbollah reacted.
See who moves, who communicates, potentially revealing networks.
Potentially. Revealing command structures, communication methods. It's a theory, but an interesting one.
Okay, so all of this is playing out against the backdrop of that ceasefire agreement from November. Remind us, what were the key parts of that deal?
Well, the main goal, obviously, was to stop a full-blown war. The core provisions involved both Hezbollah and Israeli forces pulling back from the area south of the Litani River.
That area was meant to be controlled just by the Lebanese army and UNIFIL peacekeepers.
That was the intention, yes. And the deal also said Lebanese authorities had to prevent Hezbollah attacks from their territory.
And in return, Israel was supposed to
stop offensive military operations. But, and this is the big but.
The self-defense clause.
Exactly. There was this, let's say, slightly ambiguous clause allowing actions in self-defense.
And that seems to be where all the friction is coming from, doesn't it?
It's certainly a major point of contention. Because while the big war stopped, the fighting didn't completely end.
Israel kept striking inside southern Lebanon.
Yes, conducting what they call self-defense strikes. They consistently say these are targeting Hezbollah infrastructure, personnel, trying to stop them rearming.
So that ambiguity in the agreement, plus maybe a lack of strong enforcement, it kind of allowed this low-level conflict to just keep simmering.
You could definitely argue that. It almost baked it into the deal, in a way.
What's the UN's take? How well has UNIFIL seen this ceasefire actually hold up?
Well, UNIFIL's reports paint a pretty active picture, unfortunately. They have logged a lot of incidents since November.
Like what?
Over 650 cross-border firings, they call them, trajectories. Mostly, they say, from Israel into Lebanon.
And actual airstrikes.
Yep.
Ground activity.
Over 30 Israeli airstrikes in southern Lebanon, and nearly 1,200 instances of Israeli ground troop activity near the border. That's just since the ceasefire began.
Wow. Okay, but what about fire coming from Lebanon into Israel? That's been a flashpoint too, right? Especially recently.
Absolutely. Just in the week before the Beirut strike, there were 2 separate rocket incidents into northern Israel.
Which broke a bit of a quiet spell.
It did. There hadn't been much of that since December. Now, Hezbollah flatly denied they were involved.
What did they say?
They accused Israel of basically making it up, creating a pretext for their own attacks in Lebanon.
Are there other theories about who might have fired those rockets?
Well, some talk in Lebanon suggested maybe Palestinian factions in the south were responsible. They pointed to the launch sites looking kind of primitive.
But analysts are skeptical about Hezbollah's denials.
Yeah, there's a lot of skepticism. Most observers find it hard to believe rockets could be fired from areas Hezbollah controls without them knowing, or at least, giving a nod.
The level of control they have down there makes independent actions tricky.
Very tricky, yes.
And after this latest Beirut strike, what was the tone from top Israeli leaders? Netanyahu, Katz.
Very firm. Netanyahu was clear. No tolerance for any fire on Israeli communities, not even a trickle, he said.
And he reasserted Israel's right to act anywhere in Lebanon.
Yes, against any threat, anywhere, and he linked it back to getting northern residents safely home.
Defense Minister Katz echoed that.
He did. He essentially said no peace in Beirut without peace in northern Israel, a very direct linkage.
It really sounds like Israel feels these strikes are necessary, ceasefire or no ceasefire.
That's certainly the impression many analysts have. There's a sense Israel feels perhaps emboldened right now.
Maybe seeing a window of opportunity. Or feeling a need to act decisively against what they see as Hezbollah rebuilding.
It could be a mix of those things. Plus, there's speculation about whether Hezbollah is perhaps less ready for a big fight right now, maybe facing internal issues.
Which could lower their deterrent value in Israel's eyes.
Potentially, yes. That could be part of the calculation.
But this approach, these continued strikes, it carries huge risks, doesn't it?
Massive risks. The biggest worry is that this just keeps pushing things until the whole ceasefire collapses completely.
And the human cost. We can't forget that.
Absolutely not. Since the ceasefire started, many civilians have been killed in Lebanon due to Israeli actions. The numbers vary.
Sources differ.
Yeah, some reports say around 149, others up to 190. The UN confirmed at least 71 civilians killed by mid-April 2025.
And displacement, too.
Huge displacement. Over 92,000 people forced from their homes in southern Lebanon because of the ongoing conflict. It's a devastating human toll that often gets lost in the strategic talk.
It really does. Okay, to really get the full picture, we need to step back a bit and look at the history here, specifically that deep relationship between Hezbollah and Iran. How did that all start?
It goes way back. Right after the 1979 Iranian Revolution, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, was instrumental in actually setting up Hezbollah in Lebanon.
So Iran was there from the beginning. Funding, training.
Everything. Funding, equipment, training, strategic direction, even advisors on the ground. They really helped shape Hezbollah, build its military muscle.
And Hezbollah's core goals, since they were formed, what have they been driving at?
Well, from day one, their identity has been tied to opposing Israel. Their main objectives have always been, first, getting Israel out of Lebanon, which happened in 2000, and second, their stated long-term goal, the destruction of Israel itself.
That ideology, heavily influenced by Iran, has been central.
Absolutely. Anti-Zionism is a core pillar, driven by the Iranian revolutionary ideology.
After 2000, when Israel withdrew, things didn't exactly become peaceful, but the conflict changed, right? The 2006 war, and then...
Yeah, after the 2006 war, things settled into this, well, uneasy status quo, you could call it. Tense.
What did that look like?
You'd see periodic Israeli strikes targeting Hezbollah figures or alleged arms shipments coming from Iran, maybe through Syria.
And from Hezbollah's side?
Intermittent attacks across the border, rockets, drones, not constant, but they happened. For a while, though, the immediate border was relatively quiet, even if it felt fragile.
But over the last year or so, that seems to have completely shifted. What changed the dynamics so drastically?
Several big things converged, really. First, and perhaps most importantly, the Hamas attacks on October 7th, 2023.
That changed everything for Israel's security perception.
Profoundly. It massively lowered their tolerance for risk. The thinking became, if Hamas could do that, what could Hezbollah, which is much more heavily armed, potentially do?
And Hezbollah's links to Iran and Hamas just amplified those fears.
Exactly. Second, the fighting that flared up right after October 7th between Israel and Hezbollah forced huge numbers of people on both sides of the border to leave their homes,
creating pressure on the Israeli government to secure the north.
Huge political and strategic pressure to make it safe for Israelis to return home. And third, you have Hezbollah itself.
Their military buildup.
Yes. They've significantly boosted their capabilities over the years. We're talking a massive arsenal. Now estimates are over 150,000 standoff weapons, maybe more, inside Lebanon, possibly Syria too.
That's a huge number, a real shift in the military balance.
A tangible shift, yes, both quantity and quality.
So given all that, what are Israel's likely goals now? It feels like more than just deterrence these days.
I think you're right. Deterrence is still there, but the focus seems to have shifted, broadened out. There's a clear push now to actively degrade Hezbollah's military capacity.
To reduce the actual threat they pose, not just discourage them from acting?
Precisely. Israel's defense minister, Gallant, basically said it. The goal is destroying Hezbollah's capabilities built up over 20 years.
Targeting specific things.
Like their elite Radwan forces, weakening their ability to strike Israel effectively. It's a shift from just deterring them to actively weakening them.
Which signals a more assertive, maybe more escalatory strategy from Israel.
It certainly seems that way.
And Hezbollah hasn't just been sitting back defensively during this period, have they?
Oh, not at all. They've consistently launched attacks, ATGMs, rockets, drones, other weapons at Israeli military sites and civilian towns near the border.
From south of the Litani River.
From there and other places in Lebanon, yeah. Which is a clear violation of UN Security Council Resolution 1701.
That resolution called for Hezbollah's disarmament south of the Litani, right? Only Lebanese army and UNIFIL allowed.
Correct. And we've seen their Radwan forces deployed near the border, too, plus their arsenal, boosted by Iran. Estimates go as high as 200,000 weapons now.
Various types. Guided missiles, too.
All sorts, including more sophisticated guided missiles. Those anti-tank guided missiles, the ATGMs, are particularly potent against vehicles, buildings near the border.
A significant capability against Israeli ground forces.
Definitely.
Okay, we've covered the latest strike, the shaky ceasefire, the Iran-Hezbollah background. Let's zero in now on how the violence itself was ramping up before this latest Beirut incident. That CSIS analysis you mentioned seems key here.
Yes, that CSIS report from October 2024 is really illuminating on this. They tracked a dramatic spike in Israeli strikes in late September last year.
How dramatic?
We'll put it this way. For the 11 months after October 7th, Israel averaged about 160 attacks a week. Then, the week of Sept 15th, it jumped to over 300.
Double.
And the next week, Sept 22nd, over 700 strikes. That's a massive increase, a real shift from the previous pattern.
So this recent tension isn't just a sudden flare-up. It's built on a trend that started months ago.
Exactly. Even before that September spike, there were signs things were getting more dangerous. The overall number of violent incidents was already climbing in late August 2024.
Driven mostly by Israeli actions.
Primarily, yes. And another thing we saw starting summer 2024 was more Israeli warplane overflights over Lebanon.
Which hadn't been common before.
Relatively infrequent, yeah. Suddenly, high-speed jets were flying over cities, breaking the sound barrier sometimes. It felt like deliberate intimidation.
It's a new message.
A clear message directed at Hezbollah and maybe the Lebanese population, too.
And geographically, where was most of this earlier escalation happening?
Initially, summer 2024, it was really concentrated right along the blue line border.
Daily exchanges.
Pretty much daily. Artillery, Hezbollah ATGMs, Israeli air and drone strikes. Constant low-level fighting, which had already displaced a lot of people on both sides.
But it didn't stay contained there, did it? The violence spread deeper.
No, it gradually expanded. Israel had already been hitting targets deeper inside Lebanon earlier in 2024, but the frequency and the depth of those strikes really increased over time.
How deep are we talking?
By late September 2024, the average strike distance from the border into Lebanon had grown significantly.
And what were they targeting deeper inside?
Not just symbolic sites. They were going after Hezbollah logistics, supply lines, even air defense systems, trying to degrade their capabilities beyond just the immediate border fight.
How did Hezbollah respond to those deeper Israeli strikes? Did they hit back equally deep inside Israel?
According to that CSIS analysis from October, Hezbollah's success in matching those deep strikes was, well, more limited.
They have the weapons to hit deep, don't they?
Oh, theoretically, yes. They could hit anywhere in Israel. But their typical response to a deep Israeli strike was usually to fire more short-range rockets, or ATGMs, at northern Israel, not necessarily hit Tel Aviv in return.
So not always tit for tat in terms of distance.
Not always. Although, interestingly, Hezbollah did show they could escalate the depth of their own attacks. The average depth of their strikes sort of mirrored Israel's over time.
Like they were signaling, we can reach you too if we want.
Exactly. A bit of strategic signaling, maybe showing reluctance to let Israel operate deep inside Lebanon without facing some kind of reciprocal threat.
But there was that one very significant attempt by Hezbollah to hit a major Israeli city, right, near Tel Aviv.
Yes, that was September 25th, 2024. They launched a missile. Intelligence suggested the target was likely the Mossad headquarters near Tel Aviv.
Was it successful?
Reportedly intercepted by Israeli air defenses. But the attempt itself was huge.
Why?
Because it showed Hezbollah was willing and able to target Israel's biggest population center. That's a major potential escalation.
But it didn't become a regular thing.
Not yet, no. It hasn't become a sustained campaign of deep strikes, possibly because of the intense pressure Israel has been putting on them.
Okay, so with all that escalation as the background noise leading up to the Beirut strike, what were the potential scenarios analysts were worried about back in October? And how relevant are they now?
Those scenarios from the CSIS report are still highly relevant, unfortunately. One major worry was, and still is, an Israeli ground invasion into southern Lebanon.
What would be the goal there? Push Hezbollah back from the border?
Likely, yes. Push them north of the Litani River, create a bigger buffer zone.
Potential benefits for Israel? Reduced infiltration risk? Fewer short-range attacks?
Potentially. But the costs, they'd be enormous. Huge strain on the Israeli military, likely high casualties on both sides.
And the risk of massive Hezbollah retaliation deeper into Israel.
A very significant risk. Plus, huge damage and displacement in Lebanon, long-term problems managing the buffer zone, maybe even boosting support for Hezbollah.
Israel might try a ground attack backed by air power, maybe. Threaten even more escalation.
That's one possibility. Analysts considered a ground push combined with air support and a threat to go further to deter a massive Hezbollah response.
What was the second scenario? More air power.
Yes, a coercive air war. Basically, a sustained large-scale bombing campaign by Israel against Hezbollah targets all over Lebanon.
Maybe hitting Iranian assets too. Arms shipments.
Potentially. Targeting leadership, command centers, missile sites, especially outside the border zone, maybe in Shia areas.
The advantage for Israel being fewer boots on the ground, fewer Israeli casualties.
Right. And potential benefits could be disrupting Hezbollah's command, killing leaders, reducing their missile threat, maybe even pushing them towards accepting a ceasefire eventually.
But the downsides.
Huge downsides. Massive civilian suffering in Lebanon. almost certain international condemnation, and it could drag on for a long time without fully working.
Okay. And the third scenario looked at it from Hezbollah's side, how they might escalate.
Exactly. A major Hezbollah counter-escalation, possibly with more direct Iranian involvement or coordination.
What would that look like?
Think a massive, sustained barrage of rockets, missiles, drones aimed at overwhelming Israeli air defenses, hitting cities, critical infrastructure.
Ground attacks, less likely.
Less likely on a large scale, probably. They'd rely heavily on their missile arsenal and on Iran for resupply and money.
Though Iran's own capabilities are limited too.
True. But this kind of escalation carries a massive risk of sparking a much wider regional war, pulling in others, maybe even direct conflict between Israel and Iran.
So amid all this fighting and these scary escalation scenarios, what about diplomacy? Have there been any real efforts to cool things down?
Well, as we mentioned, Lebanese President Aoun has been calling repeatedly for international help, particularly from the U.S. and France, to pressure Israel.
Any specific ideas floated?
There's been talk of informal deals, like a reciprocal halt to firing across the border, just to let civilians return home, create some space.
How would that work? Hezbollah pulls back heavy weapons.
That was one idea. Hezbollah removes major systems from the border, and maybe Israel concedes by letting Hezbollah personnel back, but, not in uniform, not in large groups.
But getting a lasting deal seems incredibly tough right now.
It really does. Especially after October 7th, Israel's security baseline has shifted so much, they're far less likely to make concessions that feel risky.
And the fundamental goals of Israel and Hezbollah are just so different.
Exactly. So a truly durable ceasefire, very difficult. Maybe the best we can hope for in the near term is just managing the escalation, trying to stop that full-scale regional war.
What's the U.S. role been in all this?
It's tricky. They're providing strong military support to Israel while also publicly calling for more diplomatic efforts to get a ceasefire in Lebanon, trying to balance those two things.
Is there any sense Hezbollah might actually want a ceasefire now?
It's possible. They've taken hits, they face pressures inside Lebanon. They might be open to it, but probably only if they can spin it in a face-saving way.
Like after they feel they've landed a significant blow against Israel.
Perhaps. Something that lets them pause without looking like they were defeated.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are the main takeaways from looking at these Israel-Hezbollah tensions?
I think the key thing is that the Beirut airstrike on April 27th isn't just another incident. It's a really clear marker in this ongoing, dangerous cycle of escalation.
It highlights how incredibly fragile that ceasefire is.
Totally fragile. And it just underscores these really deep, seemingly intractable tensions driving the conflict.
You've got Israel determined to counter what it sees as Hezbollah's growing threat.
Clashing directly with Hezbollah's commitment to its resistance ideology, which of course is heavily backed by Iran.
And looking ahead, it seems riddled with uncertainty and risk.
Absolutely. So many unknowns. How will this strike affect the ceasefire now? What's the real potential for further escalation, ground war, air war, a massive Hezbollah response? It's all alarmingly high.
And finding a way to a lasting, stable peace looks, well, incredibly difficult.
Exceptionally difficult given the history, the security fears, the fundamentally opposed goals of everyone involved.
Which brings us to that final thought, that question for you, our listener. When you consider this long history of conflict, when you hear the stated aims of all the sides, what do you think is the most likely scenario in the near term?
And beyond that, what role can international players realistically play? Can they actually prevent a wider, even more devastating war?
We really encourage you to dig deeper, look into the strategic goals on each side, explore that complex, tragic history of the Israel-Lebanon border.
Because understanding all those dimensions, as you heard today, is absolutely essential to grasping what's happening and what might come next.